Tonight, breaking news, more than 90 million Americans on high alert. Powerful and dangerous storms moving into much of the country. A deadly bomb cyclone slamming into the West Coast, bringing record rainfall, damaging winds and snow, the landslide taking out part of a highway, and a tornado outbreak in the Midwest, the town in Missouri ripped apart by a twister. Tonight, the East Coast bracing for the first nor'easter of the season. We're tracking it all. Also tonight, vaccine pushback. Thousands of New York City workers, including police officers and firefighters, shutting down part of the Brooklyn Bridge today during a protest over a vaccine mandate. This as Moderna announces its COVID vaccine produces a strong immune response in children ages 6 to 11. New details in that movie set tragedy involving Alec Baldwin. We've just learned the film's assistant director, who reportedly deemed that Prop Gun Safe had previously been fired from another movie after a gun unexpectedly discharged. Social media secrets. Thousands of leaked internal documents show Facebook employees repeatedly sounded the alarm over the company's failure to curb the spread of misinformation and hate speech. Our Jake Ward sits down for an exclusive interview with a Facebook executive with what this could mean for the social media giant. The massive migrant caravan heading towards the U.S. New video tonight showing thousands of people clashing with police in Mexico as the country tries to prevent them from heading north. And good evening, I'm Tom Llamas. We begin top story tonight with the East Coast bracing for a nor'easter as a historic storm slams the West. Millions in California under flood and wind alerts after a bomb cyclone dumped torrential rain and snow across the state. Sacramento recording more than 5 inches of rainfall Sunday, their wettest day in history. The powerhouse storm hitting California's fire zones, triggering landslides, this one shutting down a highway in the Sierra Nevada in both directions. Trees and power lines down along the coast, and in Seattle, 2 people killed after they were crushed by a falling tree. Dangerous thunderstorms also sweeping across the Midwest. New drone footage over southeastern Missouri shows the devastation after a powerful tornado touched down there, one of several reported across the area, with tens of thousands of people now without power. That storm now moving east, expected to become a nor'easter. States from Virginia to Massachusetts under flood alerts tonight, and New Jersey has just declared a state of emergency. But we want to start with Steve Patterson, who leads us off from California.
Tonight, the West blasted by the destructive power of a bomb cyclone. A swift and massive drop in air pressure combined with an influx of extratropical moisture, causing a deluge of rain and high wind. 8 million under flood and wind alerts, tens of thousands still without power. Forecasters calling it the single strongest storm to ever hit the West Coast.
Individuals are stuck in a large amount of water here.
Just outside Seattle, tragedy. 2 people killed by a fallen tree. In Northern California, historic rainfall. Residents racing to keep water out of their home.
It's all in the house too.
The storm pounding the region, a result of climate change driving extreme weather more frequently with the globe's warming climate.
A week ago, we were saying the drought, we've got no water, and here we are a week later going, too much water.
The storm upending trucks, toppling trees into homes, and forcing evacuations, burn scars, now pathways for dangerous debris.
And this is the reason why this storm system has been so dangerous inside of these burn scars. We're in the devastation that's been left behind from the Dixie Fire, and you can see this massive rock slide coming down, cutting off access to a major highway here in Northern California.
Meanwhile, tornadoes flattening homes across Illinois and Missouri as another powerful storm system churns across the country.
Can't open ripped the lid off the house.
35 million now under flood alerts across the Northeast. Residents bracing for heavy rain and high winds. While the recovery out west is just getting started.
All right, Steve Patterson joins us now from Paradise, California, which we all remember, of course, was hit by that horrific wildfire. Steve, you pointed out how these areas were so hard hit by wildfires in the past. The burn scars are now there, and this is very dangerous once these powerful storms hit that area.
Yeah, Tom, essentially anytime you have a burn scar, you have the potential for a very dangerous debris flow. And with the fires that we've had recently, there are burn scars all across the states with the potential for any rain still in the forecast. And by the way, it's still here just moving south. That means this isn't over. Tom?
Steve Patterson leading us off tonight here on Top Story, also developing 70 million Americans in the East at risk for major storms. But the focus right now on the remnants of that bomb cyclone. WNBC weather anchor Dave Price joins us now with the latest. Dave, talk to us about what's going on out west.
Well, let's go through that term first. Bomb cyclone, rapid intensification, a drop in central pressure, 24 millibars within 24 hours. That's what the term means. What it translates to, Tom? Strong storm. And that's what we were dealing with. 5.44 inches of rain in Sacramento, the wettest day on record there, and 3 feet of snow in the Sierra Nevada. So keep in mind, this was a powerful storm, and it continues to work its way east right now. There is the front. It continues to move through, slips to the south and west. Low pressure emerges from the Rockies, and we are going to see, as we head into Tuesday, late day storms popping up from Nebraska to Texas. Then, as we hit Wednesday, showers and storms roll through the Midwest. The most intense storms, though, right across the Gulf Coast. We're going to watch for that as warm air and moisture are introduced, and this storm is energized. The severe threat for Tuesday, 12 million people at risk. High wind gusts upwards of 70 miles per hour, large hail, even the possibility of tornadoes, so people have to be weather aware in this part of the country. That's just one piece of the weather story, though, across the country, as we take a look at an October nor'easter brewing for sections of the East Coast. Heavy rain, high winds, areas of flooding, difficult travel, and that's the morning rush, really, in summation across the tri-state area. Into Wednesday, it ends gradually, but keep in mind, we still could see gusty winds, and they will peak at between 50 and 60 miles per hour. The flood threat, 35 million people in this 95 corridor, taking us all the way up to Boston. That's how many people could be impacted. Power outages, flooding, it's of course going to be a travel nightmare, and the rainfall forecast anywhere from 3 to 5 inches possible as we head through the next 24 hours or so. So this is going to be a tough run for people from west to east. A lot to watch, Tom.
All right, I know you'll be tracking it, Dave. We thank you for that. Turning now to the fight against COVID-19, an FDA advisory panel set to weigh in on vaccinations for kids ages 5 to 11, as Moderna says its vaccine is also safe and effective for little kids. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk has the details.
The pediatric doses of Pfizer's vaccine are ready to go for ages 5 to 11. On Tuesday, the FDA advisory board will meet to discuss EUA approval. Officials in some states already getting ahead of an expected authorization.
In just a few days' time, millions of parents all across the United States should be able to breathe a sigh of relief.
Pfizer says its 2-dose pediatric shot, which is 1/3 the adult dosage, is more than 90% effective. While Moderna just announced its COVID vaccine for children triggers a robust immune response with mostly mild to moderate side effects. Nearly 30 million children could become eligible. But being eligible and being vaccinated are two different things. Only 30% of parents say they would get their children vaccinated right away. This mom of 4 in Kentucky is not one of them.
It's so mild in kids, like why even risk it on them?
University of Indiana sociologist Jessica Calarco looked into the underlying factors with a group of 80 moms from different backgrounds.
Were you surprised by how many parents in your group were vaccinated themselves but aren't going to get their kids vaccinated right away?
Absolutely. The messaging they've heard throughout the pandemic is that kids are going to be okay. And so they're more willing to take that chance.
And the message of social responsibility is not resonating.
That's one of the big problems here, is that we have a model of public health in the U.S. that is very focused on individual risk and individual responsibility. With vaccines, we need as many people to be vaccinated as possible to protect those who can't get vaccinated.
The other issue, she says, is COVID news fatigue.
As one mom told me, she said she's just putting her head in the sand. She's just tired of all the information.
If they aren't listening, changing minds won't be easy.
That is so true. Stephanie Goss joins us now live. Stephanie, I want to ask you, some people are eagerly awaiting the emergency use authorization for the children's vaccines. But at the same time, we saw these scenes throughout New York City, especially right there in the Brooklyn Bridge. What was that scene like and what came of it?
Yeah, it was quite a protest there, Tom. You've got about 42,000 city workers in this city who don't want to get vaccinated. There's a mandate in place for the 300,000. They have to get their first shot by November 1st. Presumably, a lot of them were on that bridge today. There is an incentive. If they get the shot this week, by Friday, they get $500. But a lot of people on that bridge are police officers and firefighters, and the numbers are much lower. Their vaccination rate numbers are much lower than the city-wide numbers. The NYPD has a vaccination rate of 70%. Firefighters at only 60%. They are angry that they are being forced off the job, unpaid leave, if they don't get that vaccine, Tom.
All right, Stephanie Gosk for us tonight. Steph, thank you for that. With all eyes on the FDA advisory panel ahead of tomorrow's decision, some states are already planning to roll out the vaccine to millions of kids in time for the holidays. Dr. Richard Besser joins us now. He's the former acting CDC director and the CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Dr. Besser, thanks for joining Top Story tonight. I noticed the Moderna vaccine study was for children ages 6 to 11 and Pfizer's 5 to 11. There's that one-year discrepancy. Does that change anything for children that are 5 years old?
Well, it doesn't, but it clearly will make it a little confusing if those products end up being approved by the FDA. The companies just took a different strategy in terms of how they're approaching and breaking down age groups. Both companies will be looking to close the gap for younger children. So in the long run, it may not make a difference. But for now, doctors, if these are approved, doctors will need to pay close attention to that.
Yeah, those parents of 5-year-olds, this party included, may have to pay more attention to Moderna now. So, Dr. Besser, the Biden administration is planning a different rollout strategy for this age group. They're planning to get kids vaccinated at places like doctors' offices and schools rather than mass vaccination sites. Do you think that approach will be effective? And I ask you, as a parent, someone who's had to go to doctors' offices where they're keeping a lot of social distancing, they don't want lines at doctors' offices right now. So I'm just wondering if this is the best plan going forward.
Well, Tom, I'm a general pediatrician, and I spend a lot of time with parents talking about vaccination. And I think, in younger children where the disease clearly doesn't have the same level of severity as you see in older, in teens and adults, you really want parents to have the opportunity to talk this through with someone that they trust. And that's pediatricians, that's family doctors, that's nurse practitioners, that's the people who normally vaccinate your kids. So I think that is a good approach. In terms of distribution, it's going to be challenging. In terms of parents getting there, a lot of parents don't get paid if they take time off to take their children in to see the doctor. So those are some hurdles that are going to have to be overcome. But doctors' offices are not the only place. It will be available in pharmacies. It will be available in many schools and school clinics. The goal is to get it available to everyone who wants it, and to have it done in a way that it really encourages trust.
I want to go back to boosters now as well, Dr. Besser. There's a headline in the New York Times. We're going to put it on the screen right now. The headline reads, "Some federal advisors have misgivings over whether boosters are widely needed." A key sentence in this article says there's significant dissent and disquiet among those advisors about the need for booster shots in the U.S. Where do we stand right now on boosters?
Yeah, this is one of those challenging issues. Clearly, there are data that show for people over 65, over time, there's a drop-off in protection, and there's an increase in severe disease and hospitalization. There's data from Israel that support that. Once you get below the age of 65, what you start to see is an increase in infections and breakthrough infections, but not of serious illness, not of hospitalizations, and not of deaths. And so the question is, well, what do you do? You wait until you see those other signals, and maybe you never will see those signals. These vaccines are highly effective. Some people in public health are concerned that the call for boosters may make some people think that these vaccines aren't very effective, and they truly are some of the most effective vaccines that we have for any disease. That's where I think there's some of the challenges here.
Dr. Besser, thank you. Turning now to new details in that deadly shooting on the set of the Alec Baldwin movie Rust. Witnesses say Baldwin was practicing with a prop gun when it went off, killing the movie cinematographer and injuring its director. Miguel Almaguer tonight in Santa Fe, New Mexico, with a new development just in.
It was on set during rehearsal when the fatal shot was fired. The cast and crew of Rust preparing for an Old West shootout in this church when, according to a search warrant, Alec Baldwin was given a prop gun declared safe for use. Sitting on a wooden pew, Baldwin was drawing his weapon and pointing the revolver toward the camera lens. Director Joel Souza, who was wounded, says he was looking over the shoulder of cinematographer Helena Hutchins when he heard what sounded like a whip and then a loud pop.
Two people accidentally shot.
Hutchins was shot in the chest and began to stumble backwards. Another witness telling investigators she couldn't feel her legs. Court documents allege Assistant Director Dave Halls is the man who yelled "cold gun," deeming it safe, later telling investigators he didn't know live rounds were in the weapon. The 911 caller reporting the incident.
He's supposed to check the guns. He's responsible for what happened.
In 2019, Halls was fired from a previous production when a crew member was injured in an accidental discharge. Prop maker Maggie Gall says Halls failed to maintain a safe work environment on their previous project.
Sort of dangerous work standards, pace, too fast of pace, ignoring people when they say that they need a minute to do something safely.
Citing safety concerns, several crew members walked off the set hours before the shooting. 24-year-old Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was the armor in charge of the weapons on the set. She recently discussed her experience on a podcast for her first film in September.
I was really nervous about it at first, and I almost didn't take the job because I wasn't sure if I was ready.
Clay Van Sickle says it could be a fatal mistake if anyone other than the armor handles weapons on set.
Nobody else touches it, so that chain of custody is unbroken from armor to talent and back.
Miguel joins us now from Santa Fe, New Mexico, just outside the set where this deadly accident took place. And Miguel, I want to go back to that assistant director that you just reported was fired 2 years ago from another film.
Yeah, Tom, officials say that he was let go from that film because he wasn't following safety protocols when that is in fact part of his position on that film. He was released from that job site, the employer saying he simply could not continue after that misfire of a prop gun, Tom.
You know, Miguel, right now there is a lot of finger pointing going on. What's next in the investigation? Is anyone going to be criminally charged?
Well, that's certainly a possibility. There could be civil charges. There could be criminal charges. All things investigators are looking at. Right now, we only know that police at the Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney's Office is planning to hold a joint news conference on Wednesday. So we hope to know more then, Tom.
Miguel Almaguer for us tonight in Santa Fe. Miguel, thank you. From New Mexico now to Silicon Valley, NBC News has obtained thousands of pages of internal documents from a whistleblower whose testimony has rocked the media giant, describing a company, Facebook, that's been accused of putting profits over people. Our Jake Ward has an exclusive tonight with one of Facebook's top executives.
For years, Facebook has been studying practically every social ill that plagues its platforms, from misinformation to threats of violence. And newly revealed documents show the company appears to be at war with itself as to what should be done about it. In a post called "What is Collateral Damage" on an internal message board, an employee says when it comes to misinformation, Facebook's core mechanics allow potentially dangerous and harmful content to flourish. Divisive posts and comments, researchers warned, seem to be better for business. Researchers also created fictitious accounts to examine where Facebook's rules and recommendations sent them. One, set up to follow conservative news, got conspiracy recommendations after only 2 days. We asked Facebook's head of content policy whether these problems can be fixed.
There will always be challenges in the social media landscape, just like you will never stop abuse in the offline world, and you'll never stop abuse in the online world. You can get better at detecting it and preventing it.
Until whistleblower Frances Haugen turned these documents over to the SEC and Congress, much of this research was unknown.
Why should the public not get to see everything that you know about us?
Our research is not secret. In fact, we have a research program with more than 1,000 people, and we publish hundreds of research articles every year.
In this case, though, it took someone actually turning over documents for us to see a huge amount of what you know that we didn't know about before.
There is research that we do that is peer-reviewed. Some research we do internally to help drive what our features will look like. Some of that's proprietary, but we do share research findings on very important areas.
We examined the documents.
Some of them are very specific.
For example, Mark Zuckerberg told Congress,
we are proactively identifying, I think it's about 94% of the hate speech that we end up taking down.
But internal research suggests less than 5% is removed. Facebook says that's because of different metrics.
When the company uses specific percentages like that, that certainly goes beyond what is called puffery to become actionable statements if they're in fact inaccurate.
And the SEC can go after not just the company, but individuals.
Executives, Mark Zuckerberg, could be held responsible.
Under the federal securities laws, if the SEC can prove its case, yes.
The SEC can, in a way, lay the groundwork for whole new laws that can change an industry.
Yes, and that is one of the paramount consequences of the federal securities laws.
The SEC has not said if it will investigate the 8 complaints it received connected to Frances Haugen.
How will you respond to those?
We will answer any questions from regulators. We stand by the disclosures that we've made to the SEC to date, and we are happy to discuss those disclosures.
All right, Jacob Ward joins us now on set. So, Jacob, over the past few weeks, we've had leaks. We've now had this document dump. It's clear people who work at Facebook want change. What exactly do they want?
Well, I think the important thing to point out here, Tom, is that we are not talking about outside critics. This isn't journalists and academics. This is inside people who have the data. And what they are saying is that something fundamental needs to change. They're saying that the core mechanics of the product, liking, commenting, sharing, the things that make content go viral, they say those things have to change. But of course, that would involve reinventing the whole product.
Yeah, so will they change those types of things is the big question.
Well, this is the thing, is the researchers we have spoken to say that when they bring ideas to the fore that would slow growth down, then they get it kicked back down. But when they bring ideas that would actually accelerate growth, they say they get greenlit. Now, Facebook, for its part, says that it takes researchers seriously, it's listening to them, and it's always trying to make the product safer and better.
And they have experimented in the past, like on Instagram, with likes, right? What's happened in those cases?
Well, in many cases, the removing of those sorts of metrics can be helpful, although with Instagram, the internal research seems to suggest it doesn't actually help with the mental health problems that teenagers have experienced on that platform. But the fundamental things, again, like virality and being able to simply get in the way and cut off the flow of something, that does seem to work. But again, if you do that to this product, it could very well slow its growth.
Jacob Ward for us. Jacob, thank you for that. To Washington now in a critical week for President Biden. Democrats are rushing to cut a deal on the president's multi-trillion-dollar spending bills before he leaves for Europe. White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell has the latest.
In New Jersey today, President Biden visited a classroom of 4-year-olds.
Hey, Caden, how you doing? My name's Joe.
To highlight the kind of universal pre-kindergarten program he wants expanded nationwide. His newly reduced social spending plan of about $2 trillion is expected to include 4 weeks of paid family leave and a 1-year extension of the child care tax credit. Today, the president also pushed for his long-delayed $1 trillion bipartisan roads and bridges bill.
These bills are about competitiveness versus complacency.
A critical week for the Biden agenda after months of internal battles among Democrats. The president met with moderate Joe Manchin, who said today he would only support a $1.5 trillion price tag for the larger bill, with issues like climate and clean energy not yet finalized.
Well, we're working on climate, basically.
Today, Republicans predict higher taxes.
Washington Democrats have spent months dreaming up new cash grabs with the IRS.
For President Biden, there is new urgency to act this week.
It'd be very, very positive to get it done before the trip.
Kelly O'Donnell joins us now from the White House. Kelly, this has been dragging along for weeks, but I noticed there at the end of your story, suddenly there's an urgency in all of this.
A new deadline because the president is expected to travel overseas this Thursday. He's headed to 2 international summits, heading to Rome and Glasgow, and he'd like to have some wins under his belt to be able to take that to Europe, where leaders will be talking about things like climate change, which is a part of the discussions happening here at home. So that is part of what is motivating this. They want the president to have some wind at his back with both the efforts at home and maybe some diplomatic boost if he can get an agreement here at home. Tom?
Yeah, we also heard in your report there, Senator McConnell mentioned those predicted tax hikes. We know a lot of headlines have been written about the Democrats' quote, billionaires tax. What exactly is that?
Well, they're still trying to work out ways to find revenue to pay for these programs. So some of the things they're looking at would be a way to try to grab some revenue that they haven't had before, looking at taxing some of the assets that wealthy Americans have. Big things like their holdings in real estate, for example, paying a tax on those assets year over year. Another way they're looking at it is to sweep up some of the income that may not be captured by typical earnings like W-2s and things. Also looking for, on the corporate side, a corporate minimum tax. All of these different formulas are still being looked at. It's not finalized yet, but they have to find ways to bring in additional revenue to pay for the programs. Republicans are very concerned about that. The president has had a red line. No one earning under $400,000 a year would pay new taxes. He says Republicans are skeptical about the impact on many Americans with this program and the different applications of how this could affect ordinary Americans and the prices of consumer goods when this is all said and done. Tom?
Kelly, thank you for that. Turning overseas now to Sudan, the military staging a coup, detaining the prime minister at dawn, announcing a state of emergency and dissolving the country's government. Tens of thousands taking to the streets in protest. 3 people already reportedly killed, dozens more injured. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez reports.
Tonight, hopes for democracy in Sudan hanging by a thread. The army seizing control in an apparent coup, arresting top officials at dawn, including the prime minister, and holding him in an undisclosed location, according to the government. But thousands of protesters taking to the streets, vowing to resist military rule, burning tires, blocking roads, and refusing to give in. Chanting, "The people are stronger." All of us must unite to protect the truth, he says. At least 3 people killed when troops opened fire on demonstrators, according to local doctors. Dozens more wounded. The White House tonight condemning the army and threatening to withhold hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. aid if the generals don't back down.
We reject the actions by the military and call for the immediate release of the Prime Minister and others who have been placed under house arrest.
President Biden's special envoy meeting with military leaders in Sudan this weekend, urging them to respect civilian rule. But just days later, the country's top general dissolving the government and suspending the Constitution.
I think the military was playing a very disingenuous role, essentially telling the U.S. what it wanted to hear, but clearly preparing to do quite the opposite.
Sudan has been taking halting steps towards democracy since 2019, when public protests led to the overthrow of longtime dictator Omar al-Bashir. But the same man who helped make way for civilian government 2 years ago is the man that led the coup this morning. Tonight, protesters determined not to let progress slip away, but facing an uphill battle.
A dangerous and violent situation there in Sudan. Raf Sanchez joins us now from Tel Aviv. Raf, how much leverage does the U.S. really have to try to roll back this coup?
Tom, Sudan is heavily dependent on the U.S. for aid, and the State Department said earlier it was withholding some $700 million in support because of the coup. But the fact that generals went ahead with this in defiance of the U.S. suggests that might be a price they're prepared to pay, and withholding aid long-term would punish the generals, but it could also push Sudan further into chaos. Tom?
Raf, thank you for that. Still ahead tonight, the major student protest at Howard University. Students reporting unsafe living conditions from no heat to rat infestations. Many now choosing to sleep outside in tents, what the university is doing. Plus, the shooting at a mall in Boise, at least 2 people dead and several injured, including a police officer. What we're just learning about the suspected gunman. And new images of migrants clashing with authorities in Mexico. Thousands now trying to make their way to the U.S. Those details and more coming up on Top Story. Stay with us. Back now on Top Story, Howard University students protesting what they describe as unlivable housing conditions. They say the school is not fixing a slew of problems from mold to no heat, even rat infestations in the dorms. Now many of the students are choosing to sleep outside. Vaughn Hilliard reports.
Tonight, students at Howard University fed up with what they are calling unsafe living conditions. Student videos showing what appears to be pipes burst, insect infestations, and mold under beds and covering the walls.
Coughing up blood, like I was coughing so bad I coughed up blood, like coughing for hours straight.
Students we spoke with say the mold is growing throughout the halls of the university dorms in Washington, D.C.
Are you guys in the same building?
No, I live in...
You guys are in different buildings?
Yes.
Two buildings, both of you coughing up blood.
Yeah.
Both students are now living on the floors of the university cafeteria. Other students sleeping outside in tents and in sleeping bags, reporting to the university and posting on social media issues ranging from Wi-Fi connection problems to insect and rat infestations, like sophomore Tia Scott.
My own room, we had a mice infestation with blood everywhere and everything. It was a horrible situation.
Scott now among the nearly 100 who have vacated their rooms, according to the students we spoke with. She is camping outside for a second week.
Right now, sleeping in a tent outside in the cold at night, trying to study for my midterms and keep my grades up while all of this is happening.
Students now calling out the administration.
I'm paying $5,000 for mold in my dorm. I'm paying $5,000 for rats.
Even leaks in their dorm rooms.
How many students do you think then are exposed to this right now?
Hundreds.
NBC News could not confirm the number, but Howard University did not respond to our request for an interview today. Last week, the university issued a statement saying, in part, members of the administration have also toured and inspected every residence hall on campus and are addressing any documented facility issues directly with our third-party housing managers. The results of our inquiries affirm that the issues are not widespread. That hasn't been enough, though, to satisfy many students. Another one of those students, Tamira Kelly. She is a freshman from out of state. She says she has no family nearby or anywhere off campus to move.
Most of my shoes in my closet, mold on my clothes, mold in our air vents, mold on my fan. There is mold everywhere.
You were breathing mold.
I was breathing in mold, and as someone with asthma and respiratory issues in general, that was terrifying. I couldn't stay in there. My parents didn't want me in there, so I had to get out of my room.
Vaughn joins us now from Washington. Vaughn, we saw there in your report you have students sleeping in the cafeteria, students sleeping outside. The weather is starting to turn in that area. It's only going to get colder. It sounds like they've hit a breaking point. How long are they going to be sleeping in those conditions?
Exactly. That's the question that these students have. We're talking about a second week for them between the cafeteria and outside here. But they said that they need answers from this administration. They said that they have requested a meeting with administrators, but have yet to get one. NBC News, we today reached out to those administrators requesting an interview. We ourselves have not heard back either. But this is the circumstances in which they said it is just as much of a necessity to be sleeping outdoors as it is a protest. And what this has become, these students who did not know each other before this, between going from midterms and classes, now are coming together discussing how they can best address this, because they don't believe particularly the situation around that mold has been addressed, and they said they're not prepared to go back to those dorms yet. Tom?
Vaughn, thank you. When we come back, one of the world's most wanted criminals captured. Authorities in Colombia arresting a notorious drug lord, many comparing his takedown to that of Pablo Escobar, and now he could be heading to the U.S. Back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with a deadly shooting at a mall in Boise, Idaho. Police say they were responding to shots fired when a shootout began with the suspect. At least 2 people were killed and several others injured, including a police officer. Police say the suspect is in custody. The investigation is still ongoing. A civil trial over the deadly Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia began today. The lawsuit accuses more than 24 defendants of committing racially motivated violence and violating the rights of counter-protesters during the rally back in 2017. The suit invokes the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, which was designed to protect newly emancipated slaves from the hate group. The Biden administration has released updated guidelines for traveling into the U.S. Beginning November 8th, unvaccinated Americans will need to provide a negative COVID test taken a day before re-entering the country. Fully vaccinated Americans will have to be tested within 3 days of travel. All foreign travelers will need to be fully vaccinated with limited exceptions. And Tesla hit a $1 trillion market cap for the first time today. It comes after Hertz announced it's ordering 100,000 Teslas by the end of 2022. It's the single largest order ever of electric vehicles and is expected to bring in $4.2 billion for Tesla. And now we want to turn to Money Talks, what consumers and investors need to know from the business world and beyond. And tonight, inflation, inflation, inflation. That global supply chain crisis driving up prices on many popular items in the U.S. And now experts are warning that inflation could last into next year and likely longer than that. Stephanie Ruhle joins me now on set. Steph, some big brands are coming out right now and saying, listen, prices are going to be higher, and consumers, you were just telling me, are likely just to keep paying them.
Well, people better buckle up, because we had been hearing, oh, this is short term. Once everybody gets back to work, once we get through these supply chain issues, we'll be off to the races. Well, that's taking a lot longer than people expected. And it's not just those pandemic items that are flying off the shelves, those sweats or the holiday toys, because we really want to celebrate this year. We just heard from Procter & Gamble, everyday items like diapers, like oral care, like grooming products. These are the things that you're not necessarily price comparing, that you just need to buy every few weeks. Those prices are going up. So for those of us who are thinking, oh, this is just short term, don't worry about it, we have to at least be mindful of it. Because while many of us have seen our wages go up, inflation is going up faster. So those wages, that's meaningless. And we need to start paying attention to the fact that short term might not mean short term for those of us who are certainly living paycheck to paycheck.
And there's other products like Chipotle, Nestle, coffee. They're all saying it's going to cost us more in the months to come to make this. It's going to cost you more to buy it.
Absolutely. Chipotle is a great example. Over the summer, Chipotle raised their prices and they said, listen, our ingredients cost more, transportation costs more, labor costs more. We have to raise our prices. And you know what happened? Their sales went through the roof and continue to. So you have to be mindful of that, because when you start to see businesses lower their prices, it's because their competition is cutting their prices. That's not happening. Chipotle and other businesses are seeing consumer demand up, so why would they drop their prices? And one other thing I want people to be mindful of is shrinkflation. Never heard of it. I know you're going, what? Many consumer brands don't necessarily want to raise their prices and alienate their customers. So you know what they're doing?
Oh,
they're shrinking the packaging. Okay. The other day, I picked up a box of raisins. I thought it was for a doll. I thought it was for a Barbie. No, that was just the size of the individual pack.
It wasn't just fun size. It was okay.
Yeah, it was really, really, really not that fun size with maybe 4 raisins in it. So you have to pay attention. This whole idea, oh, this is going to be gone quickly in the grand scheme of hundreds of years of economic policy. But in the short term, these higher prices feel like they're here to stay.
On the issue of inflation, we've heard the White House say this is going to be transitory, but transitory could be 12 months. We learned that here on this show. I know you used to work on Wall Street. The market, I like to remind viewers, always predicts the future. So if you were back on the street and you're looking at all the data right now, how long, and I know timetables are tough, but how long do you think inflation is going to last? Do you think it's going to be a year?
This could last us well into 2022. Just last week, Paul Tudor Jones, he's one of the most famous investors alive today, said he sees inflation as the #1 risk to markets, but possibly the #1 risk to society, to our economy at large. We printed a lot of money in the last year. That's flooded the system, and things are costing more and more and more. And while people at the top of the economic chain can afford to pay those prices, those who are the most vulnerable can't. We have to pay very close attention to this.
Stephanie Ruhle for us. Steph, always great to have you here on Top Story. Thank you. Now to Top Story's Global Watch and that massive migrant caravan heading towards the U.S. New video, take a look at this, showing migrants clashing with Mexican authorities near the country's border with Guatemala and breaking down police barriers as hundreds of them tried to block their path. An estimated 3,000 people from Latin America and Haiti are trying to reach the U.S. in that caravan. Olympic sprinter Alex Quiñones was shot and killed on a street in Guayaquil, Ecuador. Quiñones became a national hero for Ecuador in 2012 when he reached the 200-meter final at the London Games alongside Usain Bolt. He's also a world champion and bronze medalist. It's unclear if the shooting was targeted, but Ecuador's president has issued a state of emergency over the high level of crime across the country. Now we turn to the Americas, a look at stories coming out of the U.S. and across Latin America. Tonight, new video out of Colombia as the government captures the most notorious drug kingpin in South America since Pablo Escobar. The U.S. government putting out a $5 million reward for his capture. The cartel leader now facing a possible U.S. extradition. NBC News correspondent Ron Allen has more.
One of the most wanted and most dangerous drug lords in the world will soon be headed to face justice in the United States. Dario Antonio Usaga, also known as Otonil. For years at the top of the DEA's most wanted list, a $5 million bounty on his head. Indicted in federal courts in New York and Miami, accused of shipping tons of cocaine into the United States. Now in custody in Colombia, where he's been called the worst kind of criminal, with over 100 outstanding arrest warrants and at least 7 convictions. Accused of crimes ranging from murder to sexually assaulting underage girls.
Terrorista, violador de niños, asesino de líderes sociales y además perpetrador de los peores atentados.
The warlord captured in his rural stronghold by a massive military operation, thousands of soldiers and police, 24 helicopters. The U.S. and U.K. providing technical and intelligence assistance. Colombian authorities say they reportedly tracked O'Tonel for years through a series of safe houses, arresting and turning some of his top lieutenants against him.
Y este golpe es solamente comparable con la caída de Pablo Escobar en los años 90.
Pablo Escobar, head of the Medellin cartel in the 1980s and 90s, was allegedly behind some 80% of the cocaine shipped into the U.S. at the time and was killed in the country's drug wars. Toby Muse is the author of Kilo, Inside the Cocaine Cartels. Is this really going to change the situation in the United States when it comes to cocaine availability, cocaine that's destroying lives out there?
I would say history says not, that I don't see how this is going to stop the flow of cocaine for 1 second. You take down the head, that doesn't mean that the cartel stops producing and trafficking cocaine.
Now some security experts believe O'Tonel, like other notorious drug lords, probably already has a successor, and that his so-called Gulf Clan, with an estimated 3,800 members, is likely to continue to traffic and terrorize.
El Estado colombiano tiene que estar alerta de posibles nuevos hechos contra la población, asesinatos de líderes, masacres, desplazamientos forzados, que pueda ser una forma de retaliación.
Colombian authorities say they've already begun the process of extraditing O'Tonel to the U.S.
Okay, on that point, Ron Allen joins us now live in studio. Let's talk about that. You mentioned Pablo Escobar. He was killed when he was captured. El Chapo in Mexico escapes. How do they make sure this guy doesn't escape?
They try to get him out of the country as quickly as possible. The extradition process could take a matter of weeks, I think. The Colombians are very concerned about violence, about retaliation, about the rest of the drug cartel and others sorting out turf. There's probably an heir apparent. You know how these things go. So that's basically what they're trying to do. The indictments in the United States are in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Miami. They date back to 2009. So the U.S.
His cocaine tentacles reached all over the U.S.
All over the U.S., about a third of Colombia, but in the recent years, production's been going up in Colombia and demand has been going up in the United States. You know, we haven't talked a lot about cocaine. We've been talking about COVID and the opioid epidemic and fentanyl, but cocaine is a big part of that here, and the demand is going up, which is why the expectation is that, yes, you get this kingpin, somebody else steps in this place, but as long as there's demand here and around the world, it's a booming business. You know, there's very little else that farmers there can grow to make the same sort of profit. It's the same thing in Afghanistan with the poppies, same thing around the world. That's why the drug trade is so, it's such a difficult thing to stop, even though you get these guys.
People. Right. Ron, thanks so much for that. We do appreciate it. Coming up, they're called self-managed abortions. An international company sending abortion pills to women in the U.S. who don't have access to the procedure. Demand reportedly skyrocketing in Texas. Our Priscilla Thompson has those details next. We head now to Texas, where an international group sending abortion pills to women in the state says demand is surging. And in December, a new law will take effect, creating strict penalties for the administering of this procedure, including potential jail time. Priscilla Thompson explains. She has that story.
Last month, 43-year-old Jill says she sat in a bathroom stall, staring at a pregnancy test that was positive.
It was more anxiety than anything.
Already a mother of 3, Jill, whose name we changed to protect her privacy, says she wanted an abortion. But in Texas, where abortions beyond 6 weeks of pregnancy are effectively banned, she says she was worried about how she'd get one.
You have to do it entirely in secret, and that's a pretty lonely process.
Jill says she turned to the internet, obtaining abortion-inducing pills through the Netherlands-based group Aid Access, and telling no one. Soon after, she received an email with instructions. 2 weeks later, a package arrived from India.
You get pretty intense cramps. It's terrifying to experience it by yourself.
What were you thinking?
I didn't want to die there.
Jill did what is known as a self-managed abortion, conducting a medication abortion outside of a formal healthcare setting. We got in touch with Jill through a physician-run group, Aid Access. Its founder and director, Dr. Rebecca Gompertz, says they've seen a surge since the new Texas law went into effect.
How does this work?
Women they are guided through a list of questions for the healthcare providers that she can safely do an abortion herself at home.
Then, if patients live in a state where abortion pills through telemedicine are legal, they can receive the pills in the mail from a U.S.-based provider. If not, Aid Access says they submit the prescription to a pharmacy in India. In 2019, the Food and Drug Administration sent a letter to Aid Access demanding they stop sending the pills to people in the U.S., writing, drugs that have circumvented regulatory safeguards may be contaminated, counterfeit, contain varying amounts of active ingredients, or contain different ingredients altogether.
And what is your response to the concerns of the FDA?
The brand that is registered in the U.S., it's not available in other countries. The pharmacies that I refer to can offer our other brands, but the type of medicines is exactly the same.
A 2018 study found this kind of abortion to be nearly 99% effective. It also found, quote, no evidence that significant adverse events were higher. While telehealth for abortion care is already not allowed in Texas, in December, a new law will go into effect that prohibits mailing abortion-inducing drugs to anyone in the state. Violations will be a state felony, punishable by up to 2 years in jail and a $10,000 fine.
Sort of the wild, wild west of abortions.
Kylene Wright is the president of Texans for Life, an anti-abortion group.
What is the alternative?
So we do favor a more holistic approach, and having her understand that all of these abortion options carry risks to her.
In November, the Supreme Court is going to take up the issue of abortion access in Texas. What do you hope they know?
You cannot force me to raise a child that I can't afford.
All right, Priscilla Thompson joins us now from Dallas, Texas. Priscilla, I understand Aid Access says they plan to continue providing these services even after that new law goes into effect.
That's right, Tom. Dr. Gompertz says that she is governed by Austrian law, not the laws here in Texas, and that she has sworn a medical oath to provide care, including for women in Texas, and so she will continue to do that. And I actually explained that message to the anti-abortion activist that I spoke with, and she told me that no law can prevent everything, but she does hope that this law will stop some of these pills from coming in to the state. Tom?
Okay, Priscilla, thank you. We thank you for watching. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.